In the handout, I have a tiny URL, and I'm going to bring it up right now. It says tinyurl.com/arcanscratch1. We talked about storytelling characters. We talked about how you could click that little I for
Yep.
information or right-click and info. And this is where you can name the character. It also shows you what direction it's pointing, the X and Y coordinates that it is right now. We talked about how to bring a new sprite from library, paint your own, upload, or use the wizard. What I want to look at a little bit are those drawing tools. So in the drawing box, we had looked at that vertical reflection and the horizontal reflection. You could also tell with the character where the center of the character is right now. So when I move this character, it knows that the center is kind of here on the character. So when I go to 0, 0, that's where it's putting the character's center. You could change that if you wanted to. So if I wanted his head to be more the center, I could say, you know, this is where the center of the character is. That's what this symbol does in the painting.
Okay.
Okay, so that's just saying where the center is. Now also when we're working with the characters they bring in, these are called vector characters. And the thing about vector characters is that they're made up of points. So if kids start playing around with these characters and they click on the path tool, they could actually start reshaping the character
Oh, look at that.
by dragging these points. And what's really kind of interesting and neat about that is that if you get a chance later on and you take a look at our drawing skills, we talk about creating these custom characters. And these are kind of some skills that go into vectors, you know, by making these points. So that's the path tool. And then you could paint straight lines, and you can use a paintbrush tool, you can use a paint bucket tool. Whenever you're working on these things, you could always change line thickness and color. You can make custom colors by clicking on the paint box. So you're not stuck with having to draw with just this palette. You can come here and, you know, choose from
Yeah.
any of those colors. You see how these guys are very solid. If for some reason you wanted him to be, you could make him transparent or see-through. You could have parts that are see-through. This line, it actually paints it with see-through, so now you can see through the cat in those sections. So if, you know, if anybody ever wonders what the heck that's all about, that line is for transparency.
Nice.
Okay, also when you're drawing with these vector tools, if you just draw, it's going to make a rectangle. If you hold shift, it's going to make it a perfect square. Same thing for the oval. You can actually have text boxes, and sometimes kids actually like making characters that are a text box. So I can paint something that says hello, and that can become a character on the screen. And let's see if we, and you can have different fonts to go with it. So now I should be able to have a sprite that's the word hello. So you can make these text things. The other thing that kids do sometimes is it becomes a mistake. They'll think that this character, the wizard, should maybe be in a forest, and they'll go to the costume and they'll start drawing some trees around the character. But what you got to remember is that the sprite is everything that's on this screen. So what ends up happening is the character ends up dragging around this extra piece. So it's important for kids to realize that a sprite is a single item, and if they do something like make an extra doodle on it, you could use the pointer tool and drag around it and delete it so that that's not part of your character.
That's what I was gonna tell you. I'm like, maybe we can just draw the triangle, the rectangle or whatever tool,
Right.
and separate and isolate it from the good.
Yeah, so you can definitely do that. But the thing is, the rectangle tool is actually a rectangle physical vector drawing. So the select tool is what lets you
The
select
selecting.
pieces, or you can undo. You can always undo. Also, with vectors, you might want to duplicate things. I've got my ball sprite, and you can play around with this on your own, but this is the ball. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it. So now I've got two balls, and I'm going to color it in with a different color just so that you can see it's different. With vector drawings, this is going to be the first layer. This, now that I've duplicated it, becomes the second layer, and I can duplicate it again and color it again, and this becomes the third layer. So another tool that you have when you're working with vectors is over here on the side, and what this does is it changes the order of the layers. So instead of this being layer 1, 2, and 3, I can click on the yellow and I could drag it up through the layers.
Make it to the front. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And then also I can use my selection tool and drag around the whole bunch of them. The bottom one lets you group it together so they're no longer separate pieces, they're all together. I did put another little piece of information about how you can change the costume a little bit. So if I had this wizard, he's a vector character. I'm going to go here to the wizard. And what I want to do though is I want to kind of chop off his arm, but since he's a vector drawing, I can't really do that very well. So what I can do is I can convert him to a bitmap. Now he's like a painted piece. And what that would let me do is if I wanted to duplicate his costume so that he could move his wrist, I can take him with his wand pointing straight out. I can click on his duplicate and I can use the select tool and drag around it, and I can rotate it and move it and paint a little bit more. And so, sometimes vectors are really nice to work with, and I'm going to zoom in on him a little bit with the zoom tool. Sometimes it's actually nicer to have it as a bitmap because then you can work on editing them a little bit differently. And the eyedropper lets you suck colors out just like any other program. But this is kind of neat because now a kid can easily take this wizard and really just make his wand go up and down and do
Move.
whatever you want, right?
Right.
The last thing that I did, which might be helpful for your students, especially the youngest ones, is you could share this slide deck, you could print it out, but kids could take 500 years to decide who the characters are in a
Yeah.
story. And
Mhm.
so if you wanted to share this as a Google slide, or if you wanted to print it out, they could see in advance when they fill in their story element piece of paper, what are the options for characters. And if it's circled, the characters have more than one costume. And so like this dog has 3 costumes, this dinosaur has 7 costumes. Also, I put little music notes if they have sounds associated with them. So, that could help when they're building their stories to know what their options are for things. There's nothing wrong with teaching them this the first time and letting them just daydream and look and do whatever. But if you're actually going to have them use that story elements organizer, this might help you move the project along a little faster.
Yeah. And I think I would start introducing this with like two, maybe even one character, one backstage, and then the following week we'll like go and do 2 characters with, because just even clicking back and forth and knowing that each code belongs to certain sprites, that might confuse them a little bit, but
And the other thing is, what you might want to do is the first class, teach them a little out of order the way we're doing it, because I'm trying to do it kind of as grown-ups. We're just, you can follow along. But what you might want to do, and what I used to do with 3rd graders, is the first week, I would just show them how to find characters. And I'm telling you, for 40 minutes, they're happy to just pull characters out of the library.
that's a
And,
good one. Yeah.
let them, let them move. So if you do just like the move and the glide command and the characters, you don't even introduce if W's pressed or if the green flag's pressed. That's like a whole bunch of easy fun to begin with.
Yes.
And then what we're going to do too is we're also going to learn how to paint characters. And so for the next class, creating their own characters, again, that's like a whole class all by itself.
Okay.
So yeah, so and even bringing in backgrounds and painting backgrounds, that's probably enough for third graders for like a month's worth of work and an introduction to Scratch. And
Yeah.
then maybe with the fourth graders, you can sort of do things a little bit faster and introduce.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I'm thinking already like level 1, level 2, level 3 of Scratch, and
Exactly,
taking,
exactly.
like 6 through 8, they can be in level 3, stuff like that, like label, like level all different types of Scratch
Right.
lessons, that would be good to have.
It would, and the nice thing about it, if you took a look at our programming and coding skills, because I had
Yeah.
given you guys this.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, really and truly, when you talk about grade 4, creating algorithms using a predefined set of commands, and the same thing with grade 5, what we're doing, that's all we're doing is just choosing different commands and making those algorithms. And you can introduce that in third grade. They may not master it until fourth and fifth, but you get those
Yeah.
ideas going. And then if you take a look at grade 6, define and create conditional statements, loops, variables, procedures, and functions. Believe it or not, in Scratch, and I'm going to go share the screen again. Um, so operators, I mean, we're not going to do this today. I'll do more of this like next year. I'll do like my own Scratch level 2 and 3 and stuff with you. But more blocks, you can create variables, controls, you can do ifs and repeats. So a lot of what you're trying to do in 6th grade can easily be done with Scratch.
Yeah.
And even into 7th grade, editing, revising, detecting
Hmm.
errors. So it's amazing how many of our skills you can easily get to with Scratch.
So, oh, let's see, are they? So I have a question too on to have a teacher's account.
Okay,
Because
so
I don't, I just signed up.
right, and I initially did the same thing myself. So what I had to do, and this is on the handout I gave you,
Yes.
scratch.mit.edu/educators. If you come here, you can sign up for a teacher account. So there's the teacher
There it
account,
is.
request teacher account.
I missed that. But I mean, I signed up, so I'm pretty sure I'll see that when I sign in again.
Right. And so you can play around all by yourself for now with whatever account you set
Yeah.
up. And then when you feel like it, you can make the student accounts. And what's really nice is just like everything else,
Your class, yeah.
once you go to my classes, you can create an account at a time. You can
That's cool.
upload a spreadsheet with usernames and passwords.
Good.
And when they sign on, because I was testing it out the other day, it's going to say what's your birthday, but you could just leave it exactly what comes up, which is today's date, and it accepts it. So you don't have to give their birth date or anything identifiable. And then what's also kind of neat is that you can teach them how to go to account settings and make their own, they could have their own icon.
Mhm.
So I was using the Peanutize Me website and,
Mhm.
playing around with that.
Yep.
So it's really neat how much that, you can do with this and not have to worry about them making their own private, public
Yeah.
account.
Yeah. I like that. Great.